On today's podcast, we sit down with Ed Poston, head of A&R at Symphonic Distribution. Ed brings over 20 years of industry experience, having worked with major labels and developed artists across multiple genres and markets. We dive into his unique insights on what really makes an artist stand out, the growing importance of management and team alignment, and how data, gut instinct, and artists' drive all collaborate in discovering success. Ed reveals the evolving role of A&R in today's digital landscape, shares powerful advice for artists looking to build a long-term career, and discusses Symphonic's vision for artist-focused growth around the world. This episode is packed with valuable takeaways and inspiration for artists, managers, and music industry professionals alike. Insiders, are you ready?
Welcome to MUBUTV's Music Business Insider Podcast, where our mission is to educate, empower, and engage artists and music business professionals who are dedicated to having a successful career in the new music industry. Here are your hosts, Rich Ezra and Eric Knight. Welcome back, Insiders, to another episode of the MUBUTV Music Business Insider Podcast, where our mission is to educate, empower, and engage your music career. On today's episode, we're joined by Ed Poston, head of A&R at Symphonic Distribution. Ed brings over 2 decades of in-depth experience in artist and repertoire, and he's here to share his insights on what it really takes to discover, sign, and develop talent in today's ever-evolving music industry. We dive deep into the creative qualities and intuitive skills that set artists apart, the crucial role management and teams play in elevating careers, and Symphonic's unique approach to A&R that balances cutting-edge technology with true artist focus. Plus, Ed reveals the lessons he's learned from mentors, the value of consistency, and what really holds artists back from success. If you're an artist looking to build your career or just passionate about the music business, you won't want to miss this conversation. Ed shares practical advice, book and film recommendations, and a global perspective on how the landscape is changing, not just in the US, but around the world. Stay tuned, Insiders. You're about to get an inside look at the future of talent development in the music industry. But first, a word from our sponsor. Hey, Insiders, ready to crush it in the music world? Whether you're an artist, band, or future music biz pro, MUBUTV's personalized coaching is your secret weapon.
We'll work with you side by side, sharpening your songs, building your brand story, locking in your ideal audience, and powering up your social media game.
Starting fresh or ready for the next level, we cover everything. Live shows, marketing hacks, branding, all tailored just for you.
Flexible coaching packages let you decide what fits your time and budget. Single sessions or discounted bundles that make investing easy.
Imagine the boost after just one session. Clearer goals, smarter strategies, and unstoppable confidence. Get started with a free 15-minute discovery call at book.mubutv.com. That's book.mubutv.com. Let's make your music career unstoppable. Hey, Insiders, are you ready to take serious control of your music career? Whether you're dreaming of getting signed, finding the perfect artist manager, or landing your music in movies and TV shows, MUBUTV has you covered with 3 essential free guides.
First, learn how to contact A&R the right way. The insider secrets to approaching executives without burning bridges and with confidence.
Next, discover how to attract the right artist manager, when to start looking, what to expect, and how to find someone who truly believes in your vision.
And finally, unlock the world of sync licensing with how to pitch to music supervisors the right way. Get your music placed in film and TV, reach new audiences, and open up exciting revenue streams.
These guides are packed with real-world advice, practical steps, and the do's and don'ts every artist needs.
If you're listening on this podcast or watching on YouTube, just check the description below to download your free copies now. This is your blueprint for turning dreams into reality. Don't miss out.
Hi, this is Michael Epstein, head of marketing at Good Talk, and you're listening to the MUBUTV Music Business Insider Podcast.
Welcome back, Insiders. Today's featured guest is Ed Poston, head of A&R at Symphonic Distribution. You know, I love this conversation, Eric. This was a very interesting one because one of the things that we're seeing, and what I'm really glad that we're able to share with our audience, is that distribution companies, more and more of them are developing talent and signing talent, right, which is what Ed's position as a head of A&R for a distribution company is really all about. We're seeing more and more and more and more of that, where it's not, A&R used to be the exclusive purvey of just labels.
Right.
And now we're seeing, distribution
On the
companies
distribution level.
offering that. And I loved what he said about, artists having confidence, having, a self-assurance and a clarity of vision, that has to be apparent before they even start performing. You have to have a really clear idea. And, it may sound obvious, but I think it's so important that artists really have an understanding and give some serious thought to who they are and what it is that they want to achieve.
Yeah, I also thought, Rich, that another point that he brought up, which, this is a really great interview, was the idea of the unique artistry and authenticity are critical. Artists who stand out aren't simply imitating art or others. They carve their own path and sound. And this is obviously, I think, too, stating the obvious, but, in order to really stand out and get that attention that we're always talking about, that elusive attention, you have to be original in every shape, way, or form. Not only just music, but the way that you present yourself, what you believe in, what you stand for, all the things that we talked about. And I think that was a very unique point that he brought up.
Absolutely. And I think, your point is well taken in that I think more so today than ever before, those qualities are even more important because of the volume and the fact that you must have a understanding that this is a lifelong commitment.
Right.
This is not something that's going to happen in, 2 months or 3 months or 5 months. It may take years.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is a very, very important point.
And with that, insiders, sit back, relax, and enjoy our featured conversation with Ed Poston.
Ed, welcome to the show.
Thank you, gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much for joining us. I want to start with a sort of a 20,000 foot overview of your career. You've been in A&R for about 20 years now, and I imagine that your instincts weren't just built overnight. Was there a moment early on, a success or a mistake or even advice from someone that really locked in how you approach finding and signing talent? And what did that moment teach you about yourself?
I think it's very hard to put a kind of finger on an exact moment. I think a lot of what informed my choices was a lot about taste and being just a general music fan and a bit of a music nerd, to be honest. I listen to so many genres and I listen to so many records, and you could really see a path of discerning talent and what unique artists kind of really stood out to you. And so I think, going from that standpoint really helped. I think, finding out later on, as you're starting to see the difference of, oh, this is really exciting musically, but then starting to piece together all the other elements that come together for things to work within the realm of the music business, then that starts to become a learning of experience and saying, okay, well, this is talent you want to work with, and this is talent that maybe isn't ready to be worked with. But I was very lucky that I've had many great mentors and people kind of take me under their wing over the years, and I'm a huge advocate for mentoring and just being in the back of the room, being in the back of the studio, being in the back of the meeting room and listening to how people approach things, and then slowly starting to be more involved in the conversations moving forward in the room until you're leading those conversations. Having those people who afforded me that time meant that, the decisions I was making were informed by people with experience. So I think not necessarily one gotcha moment. And I think, I'm still learning. We're all still learning and refining what works and what doesn't,
Absolutely.
Ed, really great having you on the show. I wanted to ask you, what are the main creative and non-creative qualities that you look for in artists that you're serious about, and how have they evolved over your career?
Yeah, I think, there's so much about what we do is in the moment, this is it. I really trust my instinct and my gut. But if we start to break down, okay, well, what is my gut telling me? What are my instincts actually kind of picking up here? I think there's three main areas that kind of come to the forefront, right? Is this something unique? Is this something that's not derivative? They're truly making their own path. The music they're writing, the songs they're recording, everything that's kind of coming together. Does this feel like it stands out? And then if it stands out, you have to ask yourself, is this person driven? And I think that's something that is fairly obvious, but I think we've all seen very talented people who want to go in 20 different directions, who don't want to put the time in, who aren't really committed. And I think you can kind of feel, even in the early conversations, how they want to kind of back themselves. And then, there's something which, again, it sounds very obvious, but the ability to convey emotion that allows people to resonate with their music, whether it's they're writing their own music or they're recording other people's songs, when it's coming from a place of authenticity, something that's true to themselves, and they're able to really kind of put together a recording that really showcases that, you're much more likely to find people who resonate with it. And that's the start of building fan bases, is resonating with music. So I think those are some of the kind of core elements of you're almost subconsciously going through when you start to have those conversations, you listen to the music. It's interesting, there's an A&R based out of the UK that I like and respect, and called Danny Roberts, and we've worked together on projects before. He invited me to his wedding, which was wonderful, and he sat me on a table with a gentleman who was incredibly interesting. He scouted for Olympic level athletic talent, and having the conversation of what he does for a living, how he goes about it, and I like diving into details. So we basically talked most of the night, and it was incredibly interesting to see the parallels between what I was doing and what he was doing, of trying to identify early on whether someone had the capability of greatness, and the parallels there, and seeing how actually you can often tell before hearing a note of music, seeing someone run, how they hold themselves. There's a lot of people who come in and they feel like they have to be cocky, and it's not that. There's a presence, there's a confidence in how they hold themselves, there's a confidence in where they're going that is extremely attractive when you're looking at talent, because you're okay, I want to get on board with this. I want to help drive it, rather than please sign me. I'm desperate to have a record out. It's a very different kind of approach, and I think that is conveyed very quickly. You can kind of, over the years, you get to have a sense of okay, this person is going somewhere because of how they hold themselves.
Yeah, and it's developing that intuition that you're speaking of. I wanted to ask you, you've come from I guess a fairly traditional A&R landscape, and just out of curiosity, what is Symphonic's vision for expanding the company A&R wise? I mean, they've come from a distribution model. I mean, we talked to Jorge. We had him on the show, I guess, about a few months ago, yeah. And it's an interesting kind of transition. So from your point of view as the head of A&R, what is that vision A&R wise?
I think one of the many reasons that I was incredibly excited to come on board and join the Symphonic family is that they have something that we always talk about is an incredibly healthy balance of being extremely artist focused. I'm sure you covered with Jorge that he started out as an artist and producer himself, and still continues to do that, whilst also embracing change and new ways of approaching things. And I think it sounds like a very obvious thing to say, but I think there are, potentially companies out there that are say, okay, well, we're artist focused, but to be artist focused, we're going to do this in a traditional sense. And others that say, okay, well, we're very forward thinking, very we lean into tech, and we lean into what's coming in the future, but they maybe don't necessarily think about the artist focus. And I think something that is super important as for Symphonic, but also in general, as the company expands both in size and into different territories, is managing that balance. And I think you can see that in practical application of the people that have been hired in new territories, myself being brought on, who, as you said, has a more kind of traditional A&R background, but also being paired with someone like Tim Bruno, who is the SVP of Business Development, who is incredibly talented at looking at systems and looking at how we optimize things and looking at numbers and saying, okay, this is where we have opportunity, but also, coming from a traditional A&R background, balancing that with what are the needs of the artists? How do we work with managers? How do we work with people in the music industry to really kind of amplify their needs and their focus and make sure that we're really doing the best for them? So I think as we kind of go forward, it's those both of those things walking side by side with respect.
Ed, when you're interested in signing an artist, how important is their team to you and Symphonic in deciding to move forward with them? I mean,
here's the thing. Through the years, realizing one of the kind of key difference makers for an artist, it is often management. I think I've been part of many artist teams over the years, and the difference that can be made by having a manager at the center of that campaign who pulls everything together, aligns the team, drives things forward. And the difference to having success and kind of, being in mediocrity is often kind of in those areas. It's making sure that everyone's pushing in the same direction. And I think this is more important than ever for, as the landscape's changed, both for how an artist can interact with their fans, but also looking at how teams are made up. If we look back a good few years, it would be your options as an artist were okay, well, here's your label, publisher, manager, agent, and it was all very similar. Whereas seeing how now managers have access to funds that they potentially, can use to drive campaigns, access to incredible marketing talent that have maybe come out of traditional labels and set up businesses and working with management teams. I think that there's a really broad scope of how success can be achieved, but still at the core of that is going to be an excellent manager or management team who really understands the artist's needs and path forward that we can partner with. And I think, that's been a really big focus for us of saying, okay, well, how do we find those great partners that we can really bolster and give them everything they need from us in order to really achieve greatness for the artist.
Yeah, exactly. It's an interesting hearing you speak about that, because I think a lot of times in these kinds of conversations, it's all about the talent. It's all about, the vision. And yet to actually take that to the next level and to execute that, you need exactly what you've been talking about. You need those teams. You need that reliability of a manager with vision. You need the agent. You need the PR, you need all of the team working in the same direction. And often that doesn't get spoken of. Terry McBride of Network spoke about that. He said, and it's rare you hear that in these conversations, where he talked about the fact that when you are signing an artist, he said, I have to think of the 105 people within the organization that are going to be working with that. And if I can't work with that team, or, he says that is a very, very big consideration in terms of me putting time, effort, energy, and commitment in terms of moving forward. So I think what you were saying is so interesting for that regard.
Yeah, obviously Terry's a very smart and talented man, and I agree. I think, something that I was really kind of apparent when I was working at Concord, and I was under Kim Frankovich, who's an incredible leader and has been an incredible mentor. It's understanding that, you may be at the, a lot of A&Rs refer to themselves as being at the cold face, but effectively you are a conduit to the rest of the company. And
yes.
You are servicing so many people. You're servicing the needs of the artist. You're servicing the needs of the campaign. You're also understanding the needs of everyone to achieve their jobs within the company. And I think when you are bringing people in and ushering them through who are going to be issues and cause problems, you're not doing a disservice. And also on the same way, understanding the core principles of the company and saying, hey, we really are going to be good for you and your team, and partnering with them in good faith rather than going, I've got an opportunity, I'm going to snatch it. is really important. There's a lot of responsibility when it comes to partnering the right artist teams and the right internal teams and making sure it's harmonious so everyone succeeds.
I want to ask you a question that only somebody of your level of experience could answer. Is the value of a record label in today's world the same for all artists?
That's an interesting question. I think one of the most valuable and exciting things about the landscape right now is the options. So I think that finding value for an artist and a manager and a team you're going to be presented with a lot of different options. So, I wouldn't presume that it would be down to me to say like, labels or distributors or major labels or like various different ways that you can kind of walk a line to releasing your music is the right or wrong way, or one is more valuable, one is less. I think the fact that the options exist is very important to be able to say, this is the way that we want to work as an artist and artist team, and this is the way we're going to engage in the market. I think there's phenomenal labels. I think, we distribute some phenomenal labels, and we work with them in a really like forward-thinking and artist-focused manner. So I would never say, this would, you shouldn't do this, you should come with us always. This is the answer. I think it's providing the choices and, again, partnering with the people who are in the right time in their career to make the most of the right opportunities.
Ed, I want to switch gears a little bit here with you. Symphonic has expanded into several international markets recently, and I'm curious, will you be expanding your A&R purview into these markets as well?
I think, again, going back to what we talked about of the partnership between A&R and, different focuses within the company, I think it combines nicely. And, we are stepping into different territories, and it is often, one of the first hires within a company, within the country for the company is an A&R. We've recently hired in India, we've recently hired in France, in the Netherlands, and in the United Kingdom. And we are building out teams to support that A&R focus. But, in order to be able to work with the best people and provide them support on a day-to-day level, that A&R focus is there. So I think, as we expand further and as the company grows, I think part of the reason why they took someone with very international experience is to look at the different countries and look at them with respect and look at them of how we kind of work with them, rather than saying, hey, this is how we work, and rolling completely across. So then hiring people and hiring different A&Rs in different regions who understand the nuances, understand the network, understand the community is a really important part of growth.
Hey, insiders, we hope that you've been enjoying our featured conversation. Stay tuned because we've got so much value coming your way. But before we dive back in, a word from our sponsor. Hey there, insiders. Are you dreaming of making it big as a musician, artist, or industry pro? Well, at MUBUTV, we offer personalized coaching to help you turn that dream into reality.
Think of us as your personal guides, helping you polish your songs, craft your story, find your fans, and grow your social media like a pro.
No matter where you are in your journey, we've got the tools and strategies to take you higher. From live gigs to branding and marketing, our coaching is all about you.
Choose what fits your budget, from single sessions to value-packed bundles.
Start with a free 15-minute discovery call today at book.mubutv.com. Your music career is waiting. Remember why you started making music? That feeling of passion, hope, and longing, wanting someone to hear your story?
But chasing success can be confusing. Who do you reach out to? When? How do you avoid mistakes that could close doors?
At MUBUTV, we believe every artist deserves a clear path forward. That's why we've created 3 free guides that cover the essential skills every musician needs.
How to contact A&R executives with confidence. How to attract an artist manager who gets you. How to pitch your music for film and television placements.
These aren't just tips. They're blueprints designed for artists who want more than just dreams. They want results.
If you're listening right now on this podcast or watching on YouTube, look in the description below. Download these free guides that will change how you approach your music career forever.
Don't wait. Your future fans are waiting.
Hi, this is Matt Jones, CEO at Medallion. Are you an insider? I am. Subscribe now.
Yeah, very, very much so. I wanted to ask you, in the A&R world today, I think, data-driven A&R is increasingly prominent in various factions. I guess my question to you, Ed, is how do you reconcile analytics with gut instinct? And can you think of a time when your instincts contradicted the data?
I can't recall an exact moment where they contradicted each other, but I think, understanding the fundamentals of A&R of what we kind of talked about at the beginning of this conversation, and, understanding that, things have definitely changed in the time and, over the years that I've been doing it. At the core, it hasn't changed that much, though. Finding great artists and music, empowering them, and being able to reach their potential by backing them is at the core of every A&R conversation. Whether it's a super data focused element where it's like looking at, okay, here's where they are, here's where we want them to go, and they can take this trajectory. Ultimately, you still have to say, this is something that I want to back, and this is something that I believe in this artist. And I think the two are not necessarily opposed to each other. I think you can use it as part of a toolkit to say, okay, this is where they are right now and where we need to grow into, and then understand the more traditional elements of okay, if we help them in these ways, if we provide these opportunities for them, that creates the path forward. So I think, there's always a lot of debate over a numbers taking over A&R. Well, it depends how you choose to engage with those numbers. It shows when you are dealing with someone who understands the creative process, who understands artists, then it's always going to have that element of I get what you're doing. And there may be numbers to back these things up or not back these things up. But ultimately, it's a balance of the two, and being informed about where someone is in their career will also help you be informed about how you can drive it forward.
Yeah, I've heard both sides of this, and I've moderated many A&R panels where a lot of people talk about the fact that what data cannot tell you, what it can't show you, is anything into the future. It can't tell you whether the artist is going to be easy to work with, whether they have additional songs, whether there's a drug problem or a personality problem, or or the point that you made of drive. Did they just have a phenomenally successful, single that's moving and people are jumping on it? But like you said, there's no drive there. There's no, and I've had many A&R people at major labels talk about the mistakes that they've made in signing things like that have gone off a cliff because they didn't ask themselves the questions that, we've been talking about. So it is an interesting conversation from that point of view, because data, as you point out, can tell you a lot, but there's also a lot in the success of what you're speaking about that data can't tell you as well.
Absolutely. And I think that's just a thing of experience, and also going back to what we were talking about of mentoring, of having someone who's walked the roads many times, be there to support new A&Rs in being able to embrace that side of if you were to put it bluntly, evaluating talent and prospects. I would also say, though, that, going back many, many years, it was very easy to sit in a room and a manager would say hey, we've got this going on in other territories. And they've got a huge fan base and all these things. And you'd start getting excited. You'd be like, oh, wow, this is amazing. We're onto something really special here. And you could very easily get swept away with the hype that they were providing and what they were doing. These days, it's very hard to kind of hide behind bluster and bravado, and as much as it was a very exciting time, now you can very quickly find the data to back up and say, is what they're saying, is it true? Is this truly where the artist sits? And it takes a lot of the guesswork out of, okay, well, what level of risk are we going to take here by engaging with this artist, because this is where they're currently sitting. And I think it should always be measured with my experience tells me that someone like this can really go further than anybody else because they have that drive, because they have that presence, because they have the ability to create music that connects. And just because the data isn't there showing that yet doesn't mean that they can't. But it does allow you to kind of like cut out the bluster. I'm trying to avoid using swear words and
right. No, I know exactly what
it.
you're saying. Yeah, absolutely.
Like cut out the stuff that maybe is a lot of someone trying to sell something rather than actually telling the true story where they're at. So again, I see value in both. But again, you don't need to just do one or the other. You can truly embrace moving forward with the times and what tools you have at your disposal, whilst also understanding the fundamentals of what creates great artistry.
Indeed. Ed, throughout your life, have there been any books, films, or documentaries that were particularly inspirational to you that you could recommend to our audience?
You know what? Anyone who knows me well has probably been bought this book by me. I'm a big fan of it, but I love Songwriters on Songwriting by Paul Zollo.
Oh yeah, Paul's a good friend. Yes, that's a great book.
Well, tell him thank you from me because
absolutely.
I adore it. I think it's one of those things. It's very easy. We talk about times changing and things being data driven, or how you learn how to understand where an artist is coming from. I think this book really does a phenomenal job, and Paul's interviews with incredible legendary artists to understand, it's not a technical book of how to write a song. It's more of what was going on around you and what were the elements that you can't quantify that made for greatness and great songs. And, I think it really seems there are many podcasts and many things and many books where it's it feels like the artist just trying to sell themselves and do promo and do all those things. But it really feels that the tone taken by Paul really kind of cuts to exactly how an artist does create and what's around them when it happens. And I think that's invaluable. And the fact that it's chapter by chapter is artist, it's a big book. It's a big book. You could hold a door open with it, but it's being able to just jump in and say, I've been listening to a lot of this artist recently. Maybe I'll just jump in and really understand their mindset around this record is amazing. I think that's been kind of a core one. I think another one that, interestingly, at the time of reading it, I didn't kind of take a perspective that it was going to inform how I do things, but the Jazz Summers Big Life autobiography, I think there were some moments in there where it was I'm not going to use his exact language, but it was you can be the person who no one pays attention to at times in your career. And you can be the guy that everyone's they're a genius. You're either, again, not using his words, but you're either kind of seen as nothing or you're a genius. And actually that can go up and down in your career. But the most important thing is to remain consistent and continue to do the work and continue to just be there. And whether people regard you as someone not to be kind of taken seriously or some kind of genius, it doesn't necessarily affect how you should approach things and walk forward. And I think that more and more over the years has kind of resonated.
I want to ask you a question based on your experience. Having worked with hundreds of artists throughout your career, what do you feel holds artists back from success in their musical career?
Wow. Let's take another 3 hours on that one.
I know that's a deep dive, but
does. Go on, sorry.
No, I'm just saying that, another 3 hours. You're right. I mean, that you could talk 3 hours on that question, but I thought, it's a question that we wanted to ask you because we feel that it's a very important question. It doesn't have one answer, but coming from someone like you who has had extensive experience, working in this field, we thought that you would have more insight on it than someone who, doesn't have the level of time or energy in this field.
Completely. And, I think it is a really interesting question. And I think there are elements, going back to what we talked about managers and what we talked about, everyone pointing in the same direction. I think it's very interesting when you see something that's very successful and something that you think maybe had all the hallmarks of being successful that isn't. And you try and kind of scratch your head and look back and say, well, why wasn't that the big thing? Why wasn't that the thing that was, listening to certain records that you've been involved in and going like, that's phenomenal. Like, why didn't it resonate? And I think there's a lot of elements. I think, if we're talking about the things in your control, oftentimes, if you've got a team that isn't aligned, isn't pushing in the same direction. There's an artist that I remember vividly where we were in a label meeting and every part of the team kind of we got to talk about the music and everyone disagreed like what the artist prospect was. And it was like, this isn't a good sign. Everyone thought, oh, they're this. Like, no, they're this, and wanted to take them in a different direction and present them in a different way. And I think like one of the things that, looking at the most successful artists, it was all resonating from them. And it was all resonating from how they wanted to be perceived and how the energy they were giving. And then the manager was able to really kind of align people. And they also, gave thanks to the people who did it. If I look at, specific artists who have been very successful, there's always been thank you so much for this. And you really made a difference here. And artists who will, out of their own money, take key people on different teams out to dinner to thank them. And recognizing that, hey, you may have between 20 and 100 people working on your art form, and actually recognizing like, hey, part of the job of like the kind of core of that, whether it's the A&R, whether it's the manager, whether it's the artists themselves, is making sure that everyone feels part of that team. So I think like there's, from a thing you can do something about perspective, I think it's, again, making sure that everyone feels part of it, who is part of it, feels a responsibility, and also celebrates the wins when you get them, and is fully aligned. I think from, the things that stop things being successful that you don't have control over, there's always going to be someone else who gets that playlist because they had a team member who had a better relationship. There's always going to be someone who puts out a record the week that you really needed press and completely dominates the press. There's always going to be just a movement towards certain types of music at a time when you're maybe, if you're trying to make a punk rock record and everyone seems to be listening to hip hop, your record might be incredible and received well at a different time. You don't have control over that. But again, if we go back to the Jazz Summers point, which is like, okay, well, all you can do is be consistent. Then it's like, do the things that you can within the realms of control that you have. And beyond that, there is a lot of like circumstance and luck around the music industry, but that's what makes it exciting.
Yeah. Ed, what advice do you have for artists who are committed to building a career for themselves in today's music industry?
I think consistency. I think understanding where you're finding your fan base, engaging with them, and being consistent with it. There's lots of arguments. I get phone calls from artists a lot where it's like, oh, I've been told that the cadence of releasing tracks should be once every 3 weeks or like once every 5 weeks, and which one is it? And like all these technical elements of like, oh, now this platform says that, we'll give you support if you do this, if you do that. I think like really honing in on like, why does my music speak to someone, and where are those fan bases? Like where are those fans? I'm not a marketing expert. I'm someone who finds talent and works with them and hones their craft with them. But I think, you see it a lot where artists are told like, okay, well, you've got to go on this platform and this is the platform that breaks people. But they might not be the type of artist that works on that platform. So really understanding, and also having, an understanding with your team of like, well, this is where I'm getting fans react. This is where I'm kind of speaking with them and they're listening. And, you can take a whole bunch of ways of trying to reach fans, but really leaning in when you actually find them and understanding their needs is always going to be super important. So I think, just consistently working on things and like working on your creative output, making sure it's the best quality it can be and it really reflects you, and then being able to engage in the fans where you find them, and not necessarily saying, well, I want to be over here and I want to be doing this. Actually listen and understand, okay, this is what people are taking away from my music, and these are the people who love it. and actually I should embrace those people.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you said that, Ed, because I think a lot of times when one gets that question, often there's a belief among artists that there's some sort of generic blueprint that you do A, B, C, and D. And I love that you pointed out that, sometimes, getting on that playlist and it may not be the right thing for you and for your type of music, more importantly, for your audience. And it highlights something that I have always taught my students. I teach courses on the music business at Musicians Institute, which is that an artist must know who their audience is. And if they don't, that's okay, but they need to start investigating that. Who is my audience? And I've always been amazed when you talk to artists, a lot of times, even ones that are fairly experienced, who are like, I don't know. And when I hear that, I'm like, you know what? You should be investing time and energy into learning who they are, because it can really help. And I'm so glad you made those distinctions, because they're so important.
Yeah, and I think if we're talking about the marriage of traditional and technology-focused solutions, again, there's a marriage there. When you look at incredibly successful, big artists, and they hang around after the concert and they shake the hands of the people who turned up and stuck around, and they do the meet and greets. And you understand why they're successful, because they really have a deep understanding of their fan base and what they want. And then when we're looking at things now, there are services that we all use that really break down the audiences where they are. Is it more men, or is it more women, or is it more non-binary people? Where are they listening to your music? And again, marrying those two of saying oh, well, actually, there's a lot of audience over here and a lot of people listening on these platforms. Maybe we need to lean into that more. But then also taking the time and truly understanding the fan base and engaging in the people around the numbers as well, and kind of taking those two elements and starting to look at how you kind of build that trust with your community.
Yes, precisely. Ed, how do people reach you in Symphonic? Is it through the website or through socials?
Yeah, either one. We have a really great team of people, and you can always find us. It will always be able to reach us either through the website, through socials, and we also have a lot of events. We have events in each city where people can turn up and meet us. So we fully encourage that. And we're also at a lot of conferences and festivals, and we really want to be increasingly engaged in the music community. So you will always find us. You may find it hard not to find us.
Wonderful. Ed, we want to thank you so much for taking the time to do this. We really appreciate it very, very much.
No, thank you, gentlemen. It's been a stimulating conversation, and I look forward to chatting with you more, whether it's recorded or not.
Oh,
thank you.
Thank you so much. Eric, I am so glad that we had a chance to speak with Ed.
Yeah.
This was a really great conversation. I think I had mentioned at the top of the show that, one of the reasons that we had wanted to get Ed is because he's doing A&R for a distribution company.
Right.
And these are becoming more and more important in the landscape of music and artists building careers today. And what a distribution company is versus a record label is they put music out into the world, meaning that you usually have to have your music. You have to have recorded it and created it. It's much in the same vein as like an AWOL or a Reverb Nation. Right. They don't, fund your records.
Right.
But then again, the ability to make music today, I think, is so much cheaper. It's easier to do.
Right.
But that's why, I thought it was so important that we have him on the show. One of the things that he said that I thought was just really, really insightful and really applies to our audience is when he talked about the value of record labels today and how the landscape is so filled with so many various options where it's all customizable. And that, I think, is important because not every artist needs every single thing in every single way. Some may need PR. Some may need digital marketing.
Right.
Some may need help with social media.
There's no
work.
one size fits all. Everyone is unique in its own way.
And has different audiences to reach.
Right.
And different strengths. Some may need, booking for radio or booking for podcasts or whatever it is.
Right.
Depending on the style, depending on who the artist is. And he made that very clear with the level of options that are available today.
I couldn't agree more, Rich. And one of the other areas, continuing with what I talked about at the top of the show, was evolving quality sought in artists. And I loved what he talked about, because we've talked about this a lot with a lot of our guests. And I quote, I trust my instinct and my gut. That's getting back to what you and I, Rich, have been talking about a lot of people basing their decision-making on their gut instinct. But if you break it down, there's three main areas that come to the forefront: uniqueness, drive, and the ability to convey authentic emotion. Great artists stand out, and you can often tell before even hearing a note by the way that they hold themselves. I can't agree more. And he also mentioned that presence and confidence are key indicators. And you've seen that, you and I have seen that with artists or other people in the past. When you just see somebody walk into the room, even before they hit a note, you just know that is going to be special. And the minute they start, it is, So that's another area that I really agree with what he was saying.
Without question. And that's about the essence. That's about the essence of the art, and really understanding that, if you're not aligned and you don't have the vision and you haven't given this thought, especially like the points that you were talking about, it's just not going to work. Not in a world that we have today where there's so much competition. It's so important to have your vision together.
Hey, Insiders, thanks so much for tuning into this episode. We really appreciate it. To get show notes, links, and everything that was mentioned during this interview, head on over to our official website at MUBUTV.com/podcast/show notes. If you're enjoying the content and what we're doing here on the show, please subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts from. And don't forget to rate and review our show at iTunes. 5-star reviews are always welcome and help to ensure that our podcast stands out on the top-rated and new and noteworthy charts on iTunes and our space. You can also find us at social media at Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter X, all ending with the handle MUBUTV, which is spelled MUBUTV. Don't forget to catch our flagship show, the MUBUTV Music Business Insider video series, airing every week on YouTube at youtube.com/MUBUTV. This show was produced and created by Rich Ezra and Eric Knight. Theme music by Disciples of Babylon, and be sure to tune in next week for another episode of the MUBUTV Music Business Insider Podcast.